Trailers from Hell. Shit. I'm still on Trailers from Hell.
This is the end, beautiful friend.
Imagine Francis Ford Coppola at the 1975 Oscars, nominated for Best Screenplay and Best Picture for the absolutely amazing film The Conversation. He lost to Francis Ford Coppola in both categories for the even more amazing Godfather 2. Even if you don't think much about awards, there had to have been at least a small part of him thinking, shit, how do I top this? How do you top making two virtually perfect masterpieces in 1 year? That's a question that would defeat most filmmakers, but Coppola eventually came up with an answer. The only answer. Make the most imperfect masterpiece in the history of film. This is a great film, and it's also undeniably not the film that Coppola intended. Although his game plan was apparently to put himself in a situation where he'd be in way over his head and risk going mad. Apparently he was quite successful. He once said this film wasn't about Vietnam, it was Vietnam. I can't speak to that, I've never seen combat, but the movie does capture something that feels like the essential madness of war, and I've heard many veterans say he caught something that no other movie about that war did. The project was massively ambitious, and for years we'd read about Coppola off in the Philippines working on this enormous thing, how everything was going wrong, everything was falling apart, storms were destroying the set. The story of the film's production is epic in itself, and it's detailed in an amazing documentary called Hearts of Darkness, made by our much-missed Trailers from Hell cohort and compadre George Hickenlooper.
The music scares the hell out of the Stokes. My boys love it.
In the end, removed from all the hoopla of the time and the ridiculous expectations we all had for it, what we're left with is a sprawling mess of a film that somehow manages to achieve greatness almost in spite of itself. There's no way a single movie could encompass Vietnam, and maybe it's in the failed attempt that Apocalypse Now actually succeeds. There's so much conflict in the movie between John Milius' original screenplay and Coppola's tattered copy of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, between Coppola and Brando, who showed up unprepared and overweight. Somehow it all comes together to make a movie that is bigger and more epic in scope than almost anything you've ever seen. The only movie I can think of that even comes close to it is Lawrence of Arabia. The casting is great. Martin Sheen in the lead, Marlon Brando, Dennis Hopper, Frederick Forrest, young Lawrence Fishburne, and in one of the crowning achievements of his career, a career of amazing performances, Robert Duvall. Everything somehow manages to come together in spite of all the problems they were having, and works to make an amazing film. Coppola released a new cut of the film a few years ago, calling it Apocalypse Now Redo. It was apparently closer to the version he'd had in mind when he set out, and I have to say I deeply, deeply appreciate the fact that he has kept the original cut as available as the new one. And I don't begrudge him the new cut at all. Some people think it's better, some don't. I tend to love the first one more. The new version seems more linear to me and is much more rooted in the reality of Vietnam. At one point, Brando reads from a New York Times piece on the war, for instance. It's an interesting film to see, but I massively prefer the surreal nightmare that is the original. And I have to say, Apocalypse Now might be the only movie ever made that, weirdly enough, isn't improved by the addition of hot, naked women.